how your administration is conducting this immigration crackdown here in Minnesota right now?
Well, I'm proud of the fact that we're standing behind law enforcement, and I'm proud of the fact that we're enforcing the country's laws. But, you know, you asked a question about this 5-year-old kid. I actually saw this terrible story while I was coming to Minneapolis. We just left Toledo, Ohio this morning for an economic messaging event. And I see this story, and I'm a father of a 5-year-old, actually, a 5-year-old little boy. And I think to myself, oh my God, this is terrible. How did we arrest a 5-year-old? Well, I do a little bit more follow-up research. And what I find is that the 5-year-old was not arrested, that his dad was an illegal alien. And then when they went to arrest his illegal alien father, the father ran. So the story is that ICE detained a 5-year-old. Well, what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to let a 5-year-old child freeze to death? Are they not supposed to arrest an illegal alien in the United States of America? If the argument is that you can't arrest people who have violated our laws because they have children, then every single parent is going to be completely given immunity from ever being the subject of law enforcement. That doesn't make any sense. No one thinks that makes any sense. Now, you know, there are so many of these cases like that where if you just understand the context, there have been a number of situations that I've looked into personally where I say, wait a second, we don't want ICE arresting American citizens. They're supposed to be enforcing the immigration laws against illegal aliens. So then I look into it and I find out that the American citizen who was arrested took a swing at an ICE officer. You can't have that happen. And of course they have to defend themselves. And of course they have the right to detain somebody who assaults a law enforcement officer. Now, this is my point. Do we want these things to happen? Do we want these arrests to be so chaotic? No, we don't.
Sorry, I'll take the point.
No, it's fine. I'll take both.
After the Renee Good shooting, sir, the administration seems to, after the Renee Good shooting, the administration seemed to suggest that ICE officers enjoyed near complete immunity. But today you told the Washington Examiner that when appropriate, the administration might take disciplinary actions against ICE agents. So is that a change of opinion? And if so, why the change in tone?
No, I didn't say, and I don't think any other official within the Trump administration said that officers who engaged in wrongdoing would enjoy immunity. That's absurd. What I did say is that when federal law enforcement officers violate the law, that is typically something that federal officials would look into. We don't want these guys to have kangaroo courts. We want them to actually have real due process, real investigation, because again, sometimes they're accused of wrongdoing, and it turns out when you learn the context, they didn't actually do anything wrong. But of course, we're going to investigate these things. Of course, we're investigating the Renee Good shooting, but we're investigating them in a way that respects people's rights and that ensures that if somebody did something wrong, yes, they're going to face disciplinary action, but we're not going to judge them in the court of public opinion. I've spoken at length on this particular case. I think that Renee Good's death is a tragedy. I also think that she rammed an ICE officer with her car. So the tragedy here is multi-layered. The tragedy is there was a misunderstanding. The tragedy is that Renee Good lost her life. The tragedy is that you have ICE officers who are going into communities where they're worried that if they call 911, no one's going to come to help them. That is what produces this terrible situation, and it's something state and local officials here in Minnesota could solve.
Mr. Vice
Yes, sir.
Can you give us a message towards March for Life tomorrow, especially regarding this cooperation and family values? It's a shame the kids have to get caught up in all this, and towards that, sir.
Well, it is a shame that kids have to get caught up in this. I am speaking at March for Life tomorrow. I'm pro-life, and I'm very excited to speak there. I want to talk about local law enforcement, but I am, as a child, I saw people in my family get arrested. It's terrible. It's heartbreaking, it's chaotic, it's traumatic for the kids. I can recognize that, and I can recognize that we got to support these kids, while on the other hand saying that just because you're a parent doesn't mean that you get complete immunity from law enforcement. And I think we have to hold both of those thoughts in our head at the same time. We've got to be sympathetic to the kids who are caught up in some of these enforcement actions. We've also got to say we have to enforce the law without bias, with fairness, but we've got to enforce the law.
Mr. Vice President.
Thinking about local government, there was a class a few weeks ago, and their mayor said they haven't heard about anything in the city, and how does ICE and proactively work with these local agencies? What are those policies, and what's your response to that?
You said there was an altercation in St. Cloud. Yeah.
After the incident, the mayor said that ICE did not communicate with them that they were in the city for a major operation, but police chief did not know about the operation at the time. Could you talk a little bit about proactive communication with local law enforcement?
Yeah, it's one of the takeaways. I've talked with these guys before we came on the stage, but during our roundtable and some of the other conversations we've had, communication, we absolutely want to ensure there's good communication between federal officials and state and local officials, and I'm sure that we can do better on that. We absolutely want to make sure that we are communicating, but that also requires a two-way street, and that's the point that I make about state and local officials. These guys will absolutely communicate with state and local officials. They'll tell people if they have to do an enforcement operation in a particular municipality, but part of that is they also want to ensure that if they're communicating about their whereabouts, that's not being used as a weapon against them. Sometimes they tell people where they're going, and then they find out that their agents' faces are on on Reddit or on some social media thread saying, here's this guy, we know he's going to be at this place at this exact time. So that communication has got to be a two-way street. These guys are going to communicate with business leaders, with local officials, with state officials, but we also need the local officials and state officials to do a good job of protecting people when they're in their communities. We're not asking, by the way, we don't want any police officer in this community, in this state, to help us do immigration enforcement. We've got that. But if a protester shows up and that protester turns violent against our immigration officers, we really, really need the cooperation of our local partners. We haven't gotten it yet, but I think if we do, we really can lower the temperature. Yeah. Yeah, so I saw that story, and the story is like so much that I read in the mainstream media. It's missing a whole lot of context, and when you appreciate the context, it makes sense. No one is saying, I mean, look, there are exceptions. For example, a crazy exception, if somebody is fired at from inside a house, they don't need a warrant to go inside that person's house. There are very narrow exceptions to the warrant requirement where law enforcement officers don't need a warrant if, for example, they're an imminent threat of their lives. But what we've said and what ICE has proposed, what the Department of Homeland Security really has proposed in the Department of Justice, is that we can get administrative warrants to enforce administrative immigration law. Now, it's possible, I guess, that the courts will say no, and of course, if the courts say no, we would follow that law, but nobody is talking about doing immigration enforcement without a warrant. We're talking about different types of warrants that exist in our system. Typically what happens, not always, but typically in the immigration system, those are handled by administrative law judges. So we're talking about getting warrants from those administrative law judges. And then of course, with other cases, you get judges or you get warrants from a judge. That's very consistent with the practice of American law. I'm sure the courts will weigh in on that, but we're never going to enter somebody's house without some kind of a warrant, unless of course somebody's firing on an officer or they have to do something in order to protect themselves. Go ahead.
Do you believe that you can forcibly enter with an administrative warrant, or would that be a violation?
Well, our understanding is that you can enforce the immigration laws of the country under an administrative order if you have an administrative warrant. That's what we think. That's our understanding of the law. That's our best faith attempt to understand the law. Again, this is something courts will weigh in on. I won't speak to that. But yes, most immigration law in our country is not done through the criminal system with a judge. It's done through the administrative law system. We're going to continue that practice just as they did in the Biden administration or any other administration.
Was there anything that you heard or saw today that would cause you to call the president to invoke the Insurrection Act? And then also, did you meet or talk to the ICE agent who was involved in the neighborhood incident?
I did not talk to him today. I talked to some of his colleagues. Your question on the Insurrection Act is interesting. I've tried to understand this as well as I possibly could, and my understanding is what the Insurrection Act, what invoking the Insurrection Act would allow the federal government to do is that it would allow the federal government to use the military for local law enforcement operations. Right now, we don't think that we need that. Now, the president could change his mind. Of course, things could get worse, but right now, we think that federal law enforcement officers can do the job of federal law enforcement. Now, what I do worry about, again, is if the chaos gets worse, if more and more ICE agents start getting assaulted, if other law enforcement officers start getting assaulted, that would be a real problem. But again, we have so much federal law enforcement resources here right now. We have so many people here that we do not want to have here. I do not want so many ICE officers in Minneapolis right now. I mean, good Lord, it's really, really freaking cold outside. but they're here not even to enforce immigration laws, but to protect the people from the rioters. That's an absurd state of affairs, and we wouldn't need it if we had a little bit more cooperation from the Minneapolis Police Department. Again, the Minneapolis Police Department, my understanding is that the actual beat cops on the ground, they would love to help out, but they're being told by somebody, I don't know if it's Mayor Frey, they're being told by somebody not to cooperate at all. What kind of a person tells their local police don't protect somebody if they're being assaulted by a rioter? It's crazy, and it's got to stop. Yes.
Earlier this week, local law enforcement accused federal agents of racial profiling. Why are there so many U.S. citizens being caught up in this operation?
Well, I think your question assumes something that's not necessarily in evidence, which is that when there are American citizens who have been caught up in some of these enforcement operations, very often it is people who have assaulted a law enforcement officer. They're not being arrested because they violated the immigration laws. They're being arrested because they punched a federal law enforcement officer. That is a totally reasonable thing. Now, to the accusation of racial profiling, look, it's something that we take very seriously. We will take accusations of racial profiling back to Washington. We'll certainly look into them as they come up. But this is not a group that's going around and looking for people who violated the law based on skin color. They're looking for people who violated the actual law, the law of our immigration system in this country. And so long as we had more cooperation, I think they could do these things in a much more targeted way. They would actually know where some of the bad guys are. I mean, again, you hear things that are hard to believe, but I've confirmed that they are true. Sex offenders who we're trying to get off the streets, who the local officials won't tell us their last known address. So then the local officials say, oh my God, these guys are doing widespread targeted enforcement operations, when in reality, we would love to just go to one house. The local officials won't tell us which one house to go to.
Mr. Vice President.
Mr. Vice President, to that question, the local police chiefs have said their own off-duty officers, so police officers, are being targeted because they are a person of color and asked to show their papers. Is that a concern of the administration and the Department of Homeland Security if local law enforcement says their own officers are being targeted and they describe it as, quote, civil rights violations in our streets?
So I saw one story about this and one local police officer who said this. And look, certainly is it a concern? Absolutely. The first thing we have to figure out is whether it happened or not. And then if it happened, whether there is a good explanation or a bad explanation. And of course, if somebody violated the law, if somebody racially profiled, if somebody violated the rights of one of our fellow citizens, that is something we will take very seriously. What I also would say is that many of the most viral stories of the past couple of weeks have turned out to be, at best, partially true. So we want to try people based on reality, based on the truth, based on context. We're not going to prejudge people just because of a viral social media story that turned out to be half false.
Mr. Vice President.
President, a quick question about the roundtable you just had. I presume that happened. Did you invite anybody with an opposing point of view to get an idea of why people are upset here? And just as a quick follow-up, have you reached out to Governor Walz at all in an attempt to turn down the tent?
So I haven't talked to Governor Walz on this particular trip. A number of members of our administration, I believe our chief of staff, spoke to the governor and has been in constant contact with his staff over the past week. We've been in my office in constant contact with people here on the ground in Minneapolis. There were certainly people at our roundtable with opposing views, and look, I don't even know, whether it's public, but yes, we met with people with opposing views here at the roundtable. I wanted to get a perspective from everybody, but also, of course, offer my opinion that with a little bit more cooperation, we could lower the chaos. We're going to keep on doing that. If Governor Walz wants to call me, we'll absolutely continue talking. I will say that my sense of this situation, having talked to these guys for a long time, is this is primarily a law enforcement issue. This is the Attorney General. This is the local mayor. This is all of the organs of local and state law enforcement. That's who we focus on, but we've certainly been in communication with the governor and his office as well.
Vice President.
Yeah.
So local law enforcement obviously hasn't been really helping out with the agents who've been assaulted repeatedly. What's the plan if nothing changes there here locally and this operation has attracted thousands of agents? Are there any plans to go to any other cities from here?
Well, right now we're focused on Minneapolis because that's where we have the highest concentration of people who have violated our immigration laws, and that's also, frankly, where we see the most assault of our law enforcement officers. I mean, our plan is very simple. If you assault a federal law enforcement officer, we're going to do everything that we can to put you in prison. It's very simple. And most of these protesters, as much as I may disagree with their politics, most of them have been peaceful, but a lot of them have not been peaceful. And if you go and storm a church, if you go and assault a federal law enforcement officer, we're going to try very hard. We're going to use every resource of the federal government to put you in prison. Respect people's rights. Respect people's rights to worship. Respect people's rights to do their job without being assaulted. If you follow that basic principle, the Trump administration is going to do everything that we can to protect your rights. But if you go after somebody, if you assault somebody, if you make a 9-year-old girl cry because you walked into her church and harassed her, we're going to go after you with every single tool that we have.
Vice President.
Maybe that's with NBC News, sir. Your administration has said repeatedly this is about safety, about making Americans feel safer. So what do you say to people here in Minnesota who say it's the overwhelming presence of ICE officers and federal officers and their tactics that are making them feel less safe?
Well, one thing I would say is, first of all, we saw in 2025 the biggest one-year drop in murders in the history of the United States of America. Significant reductions in violent crime. The reason why we have less violent crime is really two reasons. Number one, because we're enforcing the immigration laws and getting very violent criminals out of our country. And number two, because we're enforcing our criminal laws and putting guys who assault and murder behind bars. This is part of a broad effort to make us safe. And the chaos that people are seeing, and I understand there is frustration of the chaos, I'd say that we're doing everything that we can to lower the temperature, and we would like federal and state and local officials to meet us halfway. So much so.
Are you saying that they're not
Perceiving it correctly? Are you saying that they're not seeing that it's the tactics or the presence of the officers that are...
Look, I'm sure that people are seeing a lot of things that would make any member of our national community feel very upset, but I also think that if you understand this in context, this is the inevitable consequence of a state and local government that have decided that they're not going to cooperate with immigration enforcement at all. In fact, they're going to aggressively not cooperate. So here's a basic illustration of this. If you are an ICE officer and you have to arrest a person who's committed assault and is also an illegal alien, but the state and local officials won't help you identify that person, many of the things that people in Minneapolis are seeing that give them pause, that frustrate them, that worry them, that make them feel like things are too chaotic, many of these things are coming from the fact that there's no cooperation with state and local law enforcement. And I guess what I would tell people, again, many of whom are justifiably concerned and worried about what they're seeing in their communities, is why are we not seeing it anywhere else? We're seeing this level of chaos only in Minneapolis. LA and Chicago, we had some problems there. Pretty much every jurisdiction where these guys are operating, you don't see the same level of chaos. You don't see the same level of violence. You don't see the problems that we're seeing in Minneapolis. Maybe the problem is unique to Minneapolis, and we believe that it is. And it's the lack of cooperation between state and local law enforcement and federal law enforcement. Sir.
Omar Menace, CNN. ICE has been operating here for years with less pushback than we're seeing right now. And even the St. Paul police chief recently said, is there not a way to find common ground without scaring the hell out of people in the community? Those were his words. And I just wonder, with this Operation Metro Surge, is any part of it meant to send a form of political message to the leaders here in Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota? And I know you talked about you've been in touch with the governor's offices and the mayor's offices, but why have you not been able to speak to them directly? Have they not been willing to do so?
Well, look, I have spoken to some of the people in Minnesota directly. I spoke to some of them today. I've spoke to others in the past. And again, our staff has been in very direct contact with pretty much every official with any influence or any power in Minneapolis. But no, we're not trying to send a political message. We're trying to enforce the law. And unfortunately, what has happened is that as we've enforced the law, there's been this weird reaction, again, unique to this city. This is not a common thing across the United States of America. There's been a very unique, very Minneapolis-specific reaction to our enforcement of federal immigration laws. What I'm trying to do here today is understand why that is. What is it about Minneapolis that has become so chaotic? What are the specific types of cooperation that we need? Look, I don't need Tim Walz or Jacob Frey or anybody else to come out and say that they agree with J.D. Vance or Donald Trump on immigration. I just don't need that. What I do need them to do is empower their local officials to help our federal officials out in a way where this can be a little bit less chaotic and it can be a little bit more targeted. Like if we're trying to find a sex offender, tell us where the guy lives. Simple things like that, simple changes in how they're approaching immigration enforcement would make this work a lot better. It would make Minneapolis' streets a lot safer, and it would make this whole thing a lot less traumatic for this community. I'll take one more question.
Mr. Vice President.
Go ahead.
President, you've said that it's time to turn down the temperature. Does that include changes to both ICE and CBP tactics that we've seen employed on the streets, including less than lethal tactics, pepper spray, pepper balls? Beyond that, what is the federal government's role in turning down the temperature? And the Minnesota Department of Corrections says that its own officers have been cooperating with ICE all along, handing over criminals once they serve their sentences to ICE officials. Can you concede that there is some cooperation with the state?
Yeah, look, if I was going to list the 5 agencies locally and statewide that I'm most worried about, I wouldn't put the Department of Corrections on that list. I think that while there are certain things we'd like to see more from them, they've hardly been the worst offenders. You agree with that, guys? That's a fair assessment. But I think when you talked about tactics and you talked about the response to things, look, we don't want to employ tactics that we don't employ the kind of tactics that are only necessary when violence is committed against officers. That is these guys' directive, and that's what we're going to try to do. And again, the president said this a couple of days ago. Whenever you have a law enforcement operation, even if 99.99% of the guys do everything perfectly, you're going to have people that make mistakes. That is the nature of law enforcement. What I do think that we can do is working with state and local officials, we can make the worst moments of chaos much less common. And all they've got to do is meet us halfway. These guys want to communicate with them. They want to talk to the local business leaders. Many of these guys, many of the people standing behind me are members of the Minneapolis community. Many of the officials that I met today who work in federal immigration enforcement, this is their home. They love this place. These are their neighbors. They want this to work a lot more smoothly. I think that we can get there. We just got to work at it a little bit, and we need some cooperation from state and local officials. The last thing that I'll say is I just hope they give it. This is a beautiful city. I've only been here a few times. I love it. Even in this weather, I love Minneapolis. We could do a lot better. We could do a lot more with more cooperation. The Trump administration, the directive that I got from the President of the United States is meet these guys halfway. Work with them so that we can make these immigration enforcement operations successful without endangering our ICE officers, and so that we can turn down the chaos a little bit, at least. I think a lot, actually. But for us to do that, we need some help from the state and local officials. We will keep on working with them, and so long as they're willing to work with us, they will always find a partner in public safety and law enforcement in the Trump administration. Thank you all.
Attorney General Pam Bondi is taking action against folks involved in the invasion of City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota. They are starting to be arrested. We have to show you a couple X posts. Here's one from United States Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, quote,
"We begin today with breaking news this morning that the FBI and Homeland Security investigations team have made arrests over that outrageous ICE protests. It was terrorism at City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota on Sunday. According to FBI Director Kash Patel, Nakima Levy-Armstrong, Enjoy Prison, and Chantil Allen have been taken into custody for violating the FACE Act. That was really fucking dumb. That was stupid ass behavior. I love that you put it on camera. Thanks for inviting your pal Don Lemon and your BLM pals. I know you're members of it. To put it all on camera. I know you really wanted fame. In fact, you wound up with infamy and some criminal problems. So terrific for you. The FACE Act is the federal law that makes it a crime for, quote, whoever by force or threat of force or by physical obstruction intentionally injures, intimidates, or interferes with or attempts to do those things with any person lawfully exercising or seeking to exercise the First Amendment right of religious freedom at a place of religious worship. So it's basically If you, by physical obstruction or any sort of force or threat of force, interfere with somebody who's trying to pray, you're effed. Okay? We've got video of Armstrong being taken into custody. This photo here was posted by Christy Nome. Look at her. I'm thrilled. This is a great moment. Let's just sit, shall we? And look at this large, unhappy woman with her hands. Yeah, they're handcuffed, right? They're handcuffed behind her back. I love it. Not so fun now, is it, Nakima? Who's the disruptor now? I hope you love the county jail. I can't wait to hear how it goes for you. Look at her. She was so sure of herself. She was so proud of what she was doing to those Christians minding their own business, trying to pray. She's a BLM agitator. She's used to Minneapolis, where all you have to do is say George Floyd and they give you a pass, especially if you're a fat black woman. Well, those days are over, okay? Because we have a new sheriff in town. And his name is President Donald Trump, who plans on enforcing federal laws, including the Klan Act and the FACE Act. She's being charged with a felony, conspiracy against rights under the Klan Act, in addition to the FACE Act charges. A felony. The Klan Act, you could go to jail for 10 years if you are found guilty under the Klan Act. Yes, BLM lady, you are being charged under the Klan Act because it's basically conspiracy against rights. If you engage in a conspiracy to violate somebody's civil rights, like their right to worship, you're in a lot of trouble. You've committed a crime. That's what you've been charged with. So, look, it's still going to have to be tried in a Minneapolis federal courtroom, which is better than state court, for sure. Going to have better prosecutors. And in general, you might have a better jury pool, but not that much better. So she's still got that going for her, that she still gets to get tried there. However, Nakima violated the law, and it's really clear. It's really not even ambiguous. I mean, we've got some ambiguity, at least some ambiguity around Don Lemon, because he's got like the journalism thing. That's wrong. He committed a crime too. I'm just saying he's at least got another excuse for being there that he could try to use to prey upon the sympathies of a jury. She's got no excuse. None. What was her role, Nakima Levy Armstrong? Well, Don Lemon was happy to tell us all at the start of his 6-hour live stream on Sunday. Watch.
Speaking to an organization there that's gearing up for resistance and protest. I've been pleasantly surprised to see the community coming together. Diverse community. If you see this, when we first pulled up, we're like, wait a minute, which operation are we at? And as it turns out, because we were like, well, this is kind of MAGA coded, right? So the American flag or whatever, but these are resistance protesters. They're planning an operation that we're going to follow them on. I can't tell you exactly what they're doing, but it's called Operation Pull Up. And it's Nakima Armstrong, and she has been doing this since George Floyd, Dante Wright, and others,
we know,
where they surprise people, catch them off guard, and hold them to account. And so that's what we're doing here. And then after we do this operation, you'll see it live. And these operations are surprise operations. Again, I can't tell you where they're going and where we're gathered right now.
But he knew. Don Lemon's not always the most reliable reporter, but luckily Ms. Armstrong spoke for herself. Watch.
Tell us why you're doing this.
This is Operation Pull Up, more of a clandestine operation. We show up somewhere that is a key location. They don't expect us to come there, and then we disrupt business as usual. So that's what we're about to go do right now.
It's all on. It's wonderful. This is great stuff. I'm sorry, but like Harmeet Dillon must have been like just popping the popcorn watching this. We go to a clandestine location. We know that Don Lemon knew it was a church. He's on camera in his car saying it before they got there. She, of course, knows that it's the church because she organized it. She says we're intentionally going someplace where they do not expect us to disrupt. Okay? Because later she would try to suggest to CNN, like she was just there. She was like basically a churchgoer. Okay, she's on camera with Lemon. We're going to a clandestine location. They do not expect us. We're going there with the purpose of disrupting them. Now, if you were an anchor at CNN and you had an interview with this lady, do you think you might confront her with those facts? Especially if she tried to lie about them on your national program? In the intro to this woman's segment, apparently Aaron Burnett said something about how the group rushed into the church. And now Ms. Armstrong on CNN is taking real issue with that. You know, trying to repaint it all like we were just trying to participate in the service. She almost spins it as like, but then like the pastor went so far we had no choice but to disrupt. Here's her trying to spin it with zero pushback from Aaron Burnett last night on CNN.
Now, the protest on Sunday interrupted the service with chants like this.
Ice out! Ice out! Ice out! Ice out!
Protesters have defended the protest, saying that the pastor at the church is a local official serving with ICE. Now, DHS has not confirmed or denied that. Trump's DOJ, though, has called this a crime and said that it was desecrating a house of worship.
And I do want to correct something that was said in the beginning. We did not rush into that church. We actually went and sat down and participated in the service. And after the pastor prayed, that is when I stood up and asked him a question in response to his prayer. And then he responded to me. And then I proceeded to ask him about Pastor David Easterwood and how is it possible for him to serve as both the pastor and the director of ICE for Minnesota. And instead of responding to me, as soon as I said the name David Easterwood, the pastor says, shame, shame. And that is when I led us in chants, justice for Renee Good and hands up, don't shoot. So I want to clarify that. We didn't rush in. We didn't bust in. We were a part of the service until I got up and posed that question to the pastor.
All right. And obviously, I'm not going to dispute your saying what happened. I'm merely describing how CNN is describing it. I obviously wasn't in the room.
But you are a chicken shit because you have tons of video showing what actually happened. By the way, how about her showing 2 seconds of what happened inside of that church to illuminate the CNN audience? Did that really bring home the shouting in the faces that William Kelly did that we've been showing you? God forbid Aaron Burnett show you what actually happened. 2 seconds of what's in there. And then she lets her guest lie about what happened and then says, oh, well, I wasn't there, so obviously I'm not going to challenge you. Now, let me tell you, like, all that is infuriating because it's a failure of journalism, and I'm going to show you what actually happened at the start of the protest in 1 second. But I just want to tell you right now, before we do any of this stuff, it's all irrelevant. All of that is totally irrelevant. Nakima, you're an idiot. No one gives a shit whether you did sit there for the first couple of minutes and then there's no doubt you did what you said you were going to do, which was disrupt the unsuspecting parishioners who are trying to attend Sunday service. No one cares. The law doesn't care if you sat there for a few minutes before you launched your disruption, okay? So I don't know who's advising you at your little BLM organization, where it turns out you take more money than you give in your charitable work, and we'll get to that. But you, to me, seem like a fraudster, madam. You seem to me like a criminal even before you went into that church. And had I been interviewing you, I would have raised it. Why do you take more out of your charity than you give to the needy, ma'am, year after year after year? Is that very Christian? Is that something God would approve of? Because you seem really connected with God, or at least your buddy Don Lemon purports to be in his questioning, and you standing up trying to cross-examine the pastor like you know better. I mean, I don't think you fully disclosed to everybody involved in this what your true character is, madam. But don't worry, it's going to come up at your trial. I'm sure we'll learn a whole lot more about you before we get to that day. So in any event, it's irrelevant whether she sat there for a few minutes before she launched the protest. But this whole thing is interesting because it's evidence of what a fucking liar she is. Once again, she lies. Her instinct is to lie. That she suggests she was just so sweet And like it really was, kind of the pastor started it, is what she's implying there. I just asked an innocent question, like me saying, Father, why didn't you mention Charlie Kirk? Which I would never yell out in the middle of a mass, but okay. She's kind of trying to spin it like she just kind of mildly asked something. Then he said something so outrageous the thing spontaneously broke out, even though she's on camera with Lemon saying they're not going to expect us, and then we're going to get them, we're going to disrupt them. Like, idiot. It's straight out of the stupid criminal files, right? Like that we used to put on cable and people used to do in like comic strips. Anyway, here is the start of the protest for you to judge for yourselves. You will hear Ms. Levy Armstrong talking at the pastor, and that's the right way to put it. And then the chants and the demands begin.
Ask the Lord to stay in your house, to pray for you on your house, Lord.
That is correct.
They're already walking down the aisles on their feet. You can hear her.
Renee Gunn! Renee
Gunn!
Oh,
there's our friend, Mr. Kelly.
Renee Gunn! Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Where are your people? Why are you not at Wimble every day fighting for the humanity, standing for our people? Where are you? You drink your coffee, you got your jewelry, you have your nice clothes, but what do you do? What do you do to stand for your Somali and Latino communities? I'm not going to comment. You have no comment, exactly.
He's in the face of this young parishioner saying, I'm not going to comment. I don't have to fucking talk to you, you cretin. But behind him, we just noticed this as we were getting the video ready for today. You see three young people holding each other in a circle, like scared. Which is exactly what Nakima wanted. Enjoy your strip search. Who's scared now? You can hear the pastor say, you better get out, to one of the protesters. In that very soundbite we just played, he says, you better get out. Let me just make it perfectly clear. This was trespass from the moment they stepped into that church planning to disrupt. Who's invited onto this private property? Parishioners wanting to pray. That's not what they were doing. You cannot show up there and have a little wiffle ball game. You cannot show up there for a square dance. And you cannot show up there to disrupt them with shouts of hands up, don't shoot. That is not an acceptance of the invitation to show up and worship. Okay, so you trespassed from the first step into the church, all of you, Don Lemon included, and you really trespassed with zero ambiguity once you were told to get out, which you were repeatedly. They're not going to be charged with trespass because it's a state crime, and we all know that Minnesota authorities have zero interest in enforcing the criminal law against anyone affiliated with BLM. In fact, they used that group to railroad Derek Chauvin into prison, and certainly not against this group because they're on the side of the anti-ICE protesters. Okay, but that's just one of the many crimes that they committed, and they did commit conspiracy against rights, the people's rights, who are cowering in fear, holding on to one another, children crying in the pews. You absolutely did, you accused felon, Nakima. And here's what we know about this woman, Nakima Levy Armstrong. According to Fox News, she's currently the CEO of a cannabis company called Dope Roots. And from 2019 to 2024, she led an anti-poverty nonprofit. You know, those are big in Minneapolis. Perhaps you've heard, called the Wayfinder Foundation. During that time, Ms. Armstrong received over $1 million in compensation. The organization doled out approximately $700,000 in grants. Got it? Let me tell you something. This is so common. You got to really look into any organization that you donate to. This is why I never just dole out money when like somebody asks me on the street or like somebody's like, oh, whatever, let me get something started. I will only give to organizations that I've actually looked into, because here's what happens. Somebody says, I need to support myself. I'm going to create a charity and I'm going to give to whatever cause, pick the cause. But my salary is going to be $500,000 a year. So let's say they earn, $750,000 they get in donation $750,000 that first year. So $250,000 goes to a worthy cause potentially, and $500,000 goes to line their pockets because they want to be kept in a certain manner of living. And that certainly appears to have been the case with Ms. Armstrong, who, again, over the past few years took in $1 million in salary. I think it's over 6 years. And donated $700,000. So she made $1 million. She donated $700,000, and that calculation is off, my friends. It's way off. For salary to take up 65% of the money you take in, we look to make sure it's like less than 15%. And this person said 65%. I'm just doing my math in the back of the envelope. This is disgusting. Okay, she's a con woman. That's clearly what she is. And she certainly had no worries about living in poverty thanks to her grift. As for the second woman under arrest, you'd be excused if you saw them in a side-by-side of thinking they were identical twin sisters. It's another enormous black woman, and this one has a receding hairline. I'm just giving it to you straight, listening audience, of what we're looking at. She's got glasses too. Chantil Allen. She's a community organizer and an elected member of the St. Paul School Board. Are any sane people still living in Minneapolis, St. Paul? Doesn't St. Paul pride itself on being the more sane one of the Twin Cities? How do you have this woman on your school board? Explain that to me. You still got a mass of people that voted for her? It's unbelievable. She has a role in educating children and deciding on what children learn in schools. She's also, you'll be shocked to learn, listed as a founder of Black Lives Matter Twin Cities on her LinkedIn profile. It's no wonder they stood up there with a hands up, don't shoot, hands up, don't shoot. That's what they were chanting, like we pointed out yesterday. Here she is, by the way. Here's Ms. Allen at the protest making the hands up, don't shoot gesture with children in the pews. As we pointed out yesterday, what do those children know about hands up, don't shoot? Nothing. What they see is people saying hands up, don't shoot. They're talking about shooting in a church and your hands up. You could excuse any child for not understanding that reference and misunderstanding it as a threat, a direct threat, mentioning shooting and get your hands up. These absolute disgusting, vile narcissists in there without a care for anybody but their own egos. They don't care about the people being arrested by ICE. Come on. Does anyone actually believe that? They want to make themselves stars. It's people like Patrice Cullors, one of the founders of BLM, who wants to line her own pockets with home after home after home. She wants to get rich off of usually white women's ridiculous, misplaced empathy and privilege, guilt over their privilege, while she rides it to the bank. And Miss Allen here clearly is one of them. You can also see her in the background as her buddy Nakima Armstrong speaks because she wants to be on camera. They all want to be a star. Well, now you are on camera, and you're going to be on another camera soon. It's called a mugshot. I look forward to celebrating it. But here's Armstrong talking to Lemon with the third lady in the back.
And that's why we're here, demanding justice for Renee Good and letting them know that this will not stand. They cannot pretend to be a house of God while harboring someone who is directing ICE agents to wreak havoc upon our community and who killed Renee Good. No, he's one of us.
Okay. They're all such idiots. They cannot pretend to be a house of God. I mean, she makes it very explicit that she is there attacking them based on their religious observance. Like, this woman is effed. They're all going down. They're all going down. This is so satisfying. God bless Pam Bondi. God bless Harmeet Dillon. God bless Kash Patel. You guys, you go. Keep going. This is what we need to see. Accountability for the lawlessness that we have seen time and time again on the progressive left. They are out of control. They are ruining this country. And as I said on Monday, they crossed a red line going into that church. And now they will be forced to pay. Can't wait for the mugshot for those ladies who love seeing their mugs on camera. And by the way, Don Lemons won't be far behind. A new year means new financial goals, like making sure your savings are secure and diversified. Will this be the year you decide to talk to somebody from Birch Gold Group? You know you've been thinking about it. They use an educated approach with a deep understanding of macroeconomics. There are forces pushing the dollar lower right now and gold higher, which is why they believe every American should own physical gold. So until January 30th, if you are a first-time gold buyer, Birch Gold is offering a rebate of up to $10,000 on qualifying purchases. To claim eligibility and start the process, just text MK to the number 989898. Birch Gold can help you roll an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold, and you are still eligible for a rebate of up to $10,000. Consider making right now your first time to buy gold and take advantage of a rebate of up to $10,000.
That memo is just a few pages long, and it details why and how federal agents would be allowed to get inside people's homes to arrest them with what we call an order for removal. But that document is issued by DHS, not a judge. So now legal experts are saying that this is a direct violation of the Fourth Amendment. This is the moment when ICE agents entered a home in Minneapolis earlier this month. Court documents show a judge found agents violated the residents' rights by entering the place without a warrant. The man, who has a legal status, was later released. Now, a newly leaked memo from ICE is showing how the Department of Homeland Security is directing agents to go inside people's homes to arrest them, even without a judge's order. The document was released after a whistleblower came forward. It was submitted in May of 2025, and it explains why ICE agents would be allowed to go into people's houses and take them into custody if they have a warrant for their deportation. It says, quote, officers should consider all available mechanisms to arrest an alien in their place of residence. Here's the catch. That warrant is issued inside by an ICE official, not by a judge.
That doesn't mean I have a free card to enter your home against your will in violation of the Fourth Amendment, just because you've been ordered deported.
The Fourth Amendment protects people from unreasonable search and seizure by the government. Now, legal experts are raising the red flag.
It's almost like just giving free will in allowing people, allowing ICE officers, or at least purporting to allow ICE officers to enter any home for any reason they want.
Are you concerned at all for the immigrant community in New York?
Of course.
Local advocacy groups now worry that the move could escalate tensions between community members and federal agents right here at home.
This was the administration secretly, behind closed doors, under cover of darkness, telling their employees to violate the Constitution, to break the law.
Top stories that we have been following for you is from this post. Bill Malhusian on X from Fox News saying, multiple sources tell me and colleague David Spunt that the federal judge in Minnesota who refused to sign off on an arrest warrant for Don Lemon is Douglas Micko, and that his wife works as an assistant attorney general in Minnesota, AG Keith Ellison's office. So this all comes on really a video that went viral over the weekend of the incident that happened of a storming of a church in Minnesota. A federal judge rejected the Justice Department's initial attempt to bring charges against journalist Don Lemon for appearing alongside protesters who breached a Minnesota church over the weekend there. So there have been multiple arrests already, and I think a lot of people were waiting to see if Don Lemon's name was going to be added, and that was not the case, at least so far, at least. So let's now bring in our next guest to help break it all down here for us, a friend here of Live.
That memo is just a few pages long, and it details why and how federal agents would be allowed to get inside people's homes to arrest them with what we call an order for removal. But that document is issued by DHS, not a judge. So now legal experts are saying that this is a direct violation of the Fourth Amendment. This is the moment when ICE agents entered a home in Minneapolis earlier this month. Court documents show a judge found agents violated the residents' rights by entering the place without a warrant. The man, who has a legal status, was later released. Now, a newly leaked memo from ICE is showing how the Department of Homeland Security is directing agents to go inside people's.
Hello, everybody. So we have a nice calm flight. I think the trip was great. We had a lot of good response, even from the fake news. And I think Greenland's going very well. It's in negotiation. And I think what we did today was great. It was great. That's going to be a great board. That'll be a board, I think, like no other. Right? It's a board like no other. A lot of people joining. We just went out with the letters. And a lot of people are joining. Now we have a flight back. And we'll be landing in 4 hours and 45 minutes. And I'm going to be very late for a dinner. But that'll be okay.
What are some of the elements of the Greenland concept that you can tell? There was a
really in negotiation, but it's infinity. The time limit is infinity, meaning there is no time limit. It's forever. It's you hear about 99 years, 50 years. It's forever. That was discussed. We can do anything we want. We can do military. We can do anything we want. And it's being negotiated, and let's see what happens. I think it'll be good.
Would the U.S. have
no price? There's no purchase price.
Would the U.S. have pockets of sovereignty over parts?
We have a lot of great things in the deal, and don't forget they're also good for Europe. Because when we're good, they're good, and if we're not good, that's not very good for them. Because we hold it all together. We're holding it all together.
Does that actually give you control of land in Greenland? Does it give U.S. control ownership of land?
Yeah, whatever we want, yeah.
Ramp up the ability to handle a protracted conflict without the U.S.? What is the plan B if diplomacy fails?
I understand your question, but I would like to assure you that our Polish independence and sovereignty is very strong. The first, I believe in Polish soldiers, of course, in our history and our readiness to fight with everyone who would like to invade Poland. So we felt the strong country on the eastern flank of NATO. But we also believe in diplomacy. It's natural in NATO, our cooperation with NATO, with European Union. Diplomacy is, of course, the part of the security guarantees. But what we can do as the Republic of Poland, that our friends also doing this, I see the President of Latvia, Baltic states, we of course made the decisions to increase the budget for military service, and it was the great achievement of Europe. But what have happened? In Hague, Donald Trump pushed Europeans to increase the military service cost and GDP. Also, European Union need Donald Trump to be pushed by him to increase this budget. It's not good way, and many countries inside Europe still haven't done this. So we have big problem about the feeling for our security and responsibility for secure European Union.
I'm going to get to you in just a second, Mr. Secretary General, of course. But
Can I
President Stubb, I'd like to ask you first. Do you see this sense of urgency for a Plan B among your European partners? Is there the need for that? And who should lead the charge? Because, I mean, it's a bit unfair. We're sitting here on the panel with Finland and Poland. You are really doing a lot when it comes to defense, especially Finland. You have this comprehensive approach to defense in your country. Are your partners, are they experiencing the urgency? Who needs to come up with the Plan B and lead the charge?
Well, I mean, two answers. First is a direct answer to the question of this panel: can Europe defend itself? My answer is unequivocally yes.
Without the Americans?
Without the Americans, I mean...
How?
Well, look...
But you're relying on them for these key elements. How would you do it at scale and at duration and at intensity?
With an assumption that the United States would cut off completely any kind of work.
Yeah.
Well, if we look at the defense composure of Europe by and large, in a country like Finland, So how do we do it? We have conscription. 1 million have done it. We can mobilize 280,000 soldiers within weeks. We have 62 F-18s. Your next question is going to be, do they fly without Americans? No, they don't. But do we trust that they will continue to fly because it's in the interest of America to do so? Yes. We just bought 64 F-35s. We have the biggest artillery in Europe together with Poland. We have long-range missiles, land, sea, and air. We don't have this because we're worried about Stockholm, right? So, the bottom line is that if you ask me the question that can the Finnish military defend itself against a Russian attack, the whole defense posture of the way in which you do it, yes, we can. But then the second question, which you were alluding to, I think we also have to understand that you fight wars on the battlefield, but you win them at home. And that means that all of us need to focus more on comprehensive security. The civilian side of things. That's why we have civilian shelters for 4.4 million Finns. That's why we have a security of supply where we don't get into any kind of trouble with food shortages, energy shortages, or electricity grids, because we've got this. And this is the, I think, capability that a lot of European states need to do. My absolutely final point. It's all good and well to talk about percentages, but just remember, you don't fight wars with percentages. You fight wars with capabilities, and those you just need to have in stock.
Do European NATO allies need to think more about having capabilities that overlap with the United States?
Well, this is
to hedge their bets.
The NATO is constructed like this, that the US, Canada, and the European NATO allies were completely integrated. It doesn't mean that there is the US coming to the rescue of Europe or Europe coming to the rescue of the United States. We are working completely integrated. And for the protection of both the US and Europe, it's crucial that NATO is there. There was one big irritant on the American side with NATO. And the big irritant since Eisenhower was that they were spending, the US was spending, so much more than Europe was spending. Even today, the US is spending 3.5% of GDP on core defense. We are spending in Europe average 2% of defense. And here's my question to the audience. I mean, many of you, I know, criticize Donald Trump. But do you really think that without Donald Trump, 8 big economies in Europe, including Spain and Italy and Belgium, Canada, by the way, also outside Europe, would have come to 2%? In 2025, when they were only on 1.5% at the beginning of the year? No way. Without Donald Trump, this would never have happened. They're all on 2% now. Do you really think that in the summit in The Hague, as already Alex was saying, sorry, the president of Finland was saying, that we would come to an overall defense spending of 5%, including 3.5% in core defense, if President Trump would not have been re-elected as president of the United States? No way. It would never have happened. So again, I'm not popular with you now because I'm defending Donald Trump, but I really believe we can be happy that he is there because he has forced us in Europe to step up, to face the consequences, that we have to take care more of our own defense. And this is the thing. The Americans still have over 80,000 soldiers in Europe. They are still, including in Poland, in Germany, etc. They are still heavily invested in European defense. And yes, they have to pivot more towards Asia. So it is only logical for them to expect us in Europe to step up over time. And there is this plan already since Jens Stoltenberg, my predecessor, designed it, the NATO defense planning process, to over time make sure that Europe can take over more of these capabilities, of these core enablers from the US, to do more of the protection of the European continent. We're still having a strong conventional US presence in Europe, also going forward. And of course, the nuclear umbrella as our ultimate guarantor. But again, I'm absolutely convinced without Donald Trump, we would not have taken those decisions, and they are crucial, particularly for the European and the Canadian side of NATO, to really grow up in the post-Cold War world.
Madam Kelly, you are not happy with this answer, I suppose, of Mark Rutte, that we need Donald Trump in the European Union, but we believe in our military service in Poland. I would like to add that Poland won with the Soviets and Bolsheviks. Finland won with the Soviet in Bolsheviks in 20th century. Japanese and Afghans won with the Soviet Union. So we are ready in our countries to secure our independence, but we need geopolitical and some relations in Europe and in the world to be stronger.
We have time for just a quick closing round now, and I'd like to turn to Nadia to kick us off with that, because we have the statement from the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen yesterday describing a seismic change that makes it necessary to build a new form of European independence. And I'm wondering if you can give us, from the investment perspective, what you think is necessary to realize.
The state of the rules-based international order and the cost of inaction in the face of aggression. In recent months, the United States has taken a central role in advancing diplomatic efforts aimed at ending the war, working closely with Kiev and European partners. These efforts have resulted in a comprehensive 20-point peace plan aimed at laying the foundation for a just and lasting peace. And I know that President Zelensky just met with President Trump, and I hope that was a very, very good meeting. These efforts, as I mentioned, reflect a sustained push grounded in shared values and strategic cooperation